It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey, Not the Face with your host, John Nash, and your producer, me, Steffi Haynes. And today we'll be taking a look at the payouts for the Lee versus Zuffa antitrust case, Dana White's alleged $25 million gambling debt, TKO's dividends, PFL's John Martin, and more. But if you want access to all of that, you'll need to subscribe with your coins because some of this will be behind a paywall. Now, before we dive into the meat and potatoes of the show, we wanted to address a question that I had from last week about whether an outside government agency could be tasked to retrieve the phone and email records in the current antitrust cases. So we consulted a friend who is a retired FBI analyst, and he had an answer of sorts for us. It's not the most definitive answer, but it's the best we've got right now. And he did say that if it wasn't good enough, he could consult some friends of his that are in other government agencies. So we'll see how this goes, but John's going to take it from here and explain what he said.
Well, first, I should know everybody should be nice to us because we have friends in very powerful places.
Yes,
that will go after you if you are rude, even just rude to us on social media. We will sick these people on you. Okay, this is verbatim from text messages he sent us. So here's what it says. If the discovery information regarding telephone calls, texts, and emails is not presented to the prosecution, or in this case, the plaintiffs, despite any sanctions, assuming the judge handed down sanctions, the U.S. Attorney's Office could issue a formal subpoena for the records. The subpoena would ask for the transactional data, which is an example would be, on this example, he gives A called B on this or that date or time, or B texted C on this or that date or time. And so-and-so emailed so-and-so with the subject line, blah, blah, blah. That's, again, verbatim from his text message. I don't use blah, blah, blah. And would also contain the email header information. A judge would have to sign off on the search warrant affidavit in order to get the content, i.e. the body of the text or email. And then our FBI buddy did say if we needed further help on this, he could ask some of his friends or other agencies, as Stephanie pointed out. So hopefully that answers some of it. It was illuminating for me because I don't know the process, but I do not know if we will get to that in this current antitrust case. But that is a possibility, I guess, that if they deny doing discovery, the defendants, that there is always a chance that the judge could ask some other party to get involved and start using their abilities to examine people's emails and messages.
There we have it. So anyways, John, you are back in California. How is getting readjusted to work life?
Well, it's not too bad. What's hilarious is my older brother. He took over for me. As people might be aware, we take turns watching my elderly mom. And the very next day, he lost her. So he had to call in a panic. Where would mom be? And I go, I can't. You can't lose your mom the first day you're there. So I was enjoying that my first day away, that he had lost our mom.
Where was she?
She was on her own, went across to walk over to neighbors and visit them. And she should not do that because we need to know where she is because she's fragile and 87. But he was, he went to the bathroom, came out, and she was gone. And in a moment of panic, he didn't know where she went. So I found it, listen, you know what? I take joy in that. For most people, that'd be probably traumatic. I was finding joy that he had to put up with some of my mom's antics.
Well, I am glad to know that she is safe because I like your mom. She's really sweet.
She is sweet. Not so sweet as the cat after I got back to LA. She's been holding a little grudge at me.
Oh, but you have been gone a little bit longer than you normally are. So yeah. I'd be holding a grudge too if I were the cat.
She's listening. At night, she's nice. She's all cuddly. But during the day, she lets me know that she's still a little annoyed that I was gone.
Well, I guess we should go ahead and get down to brass tacks. So let's do that. And the first topic, we're going to talk about the Lee versus Zuffa settlement payouts. What was the information that we got?
Well, what the key thing we got this week for Lee v. Zuffa was we've got the claims administrator, and I'm not sure how you pronounce his name, and I can't remember if we asked Eric Kramer, Rob Macy, or Michael D'Angelo when they were on the show how to pronounce this, but Angion Group, that's the claim administrator.
I think
they filed a. Oh, sorry, what's that, Stephanie?
I was just going to say, I think that's how you pronounce it.
Look at that. I nailed it. I'm just guessing. But they filed a status report, basically updating the court where they're at with the class members' claim submission. According to them, the settlement fund, and this is my reading through it. I got to be clear on this. It says it'll be distributed no later than September 19th. But I think that's the first step. That's not when it actually goes out. September 30th would be the latest date it could possibly go out to the fighters. And I should note too, if I'm sure some fighters will panic come September 30th if they know that some fighters got their check and they didn't, is that depending on how it's delivered, it could change the speed at which it could get. In other words, an electronic payment could go at a certain speed. A check being mailed might take a certain amount of time. So, but at that date would be the date they would the final distribution. Some of them might be distributed a day or two before based on the method they're going to use. So in other words, if you're a fighter listening, do not panic immediately if you do not have your check at the end of the month. Give it a little bit of time and then start panicking if a little bit of time goes by and you still don't have it. But that was the notice. And what's also interesting, it broke down some of the things about this the claim. It gave us an update of the number of fighters. We now know the exact number that submitted their claim submissions, that executed. In other words, they signed the claim submission, 1,088 fighters. This is out of the 1,121 fighters that they had information for. Now, I don't know if that's the full class members, because previously, several months back, there was another document by Halsinger that said the total number of estimated class members was 1,140. So my guess, and I'm going to look into this and maybe I'll have more information next week on this. My guess is that the total number of people that were eligible for the class was 1,140. The number of people that they were able to verify their addresses for or get contact information for was 1,121. And the number of fighters that submitted a claim was 1,088. So, of the number that they had addresses, that's 97% submitted a claim. Of that, if it's the 1,140, that's 95%. And as they noted this is the largest amount of class members submitting claims that Angion has ever dealt with in antitrust cases or in class action cases. So it's an impressive number. And if you notice the trades, the class action trade magazines, they do note that this was a very large participation rate. Compared, one of the largest, might even set a record of some sort of participants in a class action that got their claim. Wow. So that was interesting to note. And then finally give us a breakdown of what the payments are going to be. So it's going to be, for the class, the average payment for those 1,088 fighters is $231,000. So the median, in other words, 50% of the fighters will make more, 50% of the fighters will get less than this, was $86,000. The lowest paid fighter was $16,138.45. And the highest paid fighter was $10,334,240.72. And based on the amount of money that the claims, the amount of money they said the bout compensation that the fighters that were in the class earned, which is 338 or 538 million, we can use that to calculate how they're doing actually the calculations for the fighters. So we know that when you break it down by the number of fights that is in the class and how much of the portion of the settlement goes to the for bout compensation, that they get about $14,000, I believe $180 each per fight they participated in. And then the other percentages, the total amount of money they earned during the class period, which is from December 16th, 2010 until June 30th, 2017, all the bout compensation they earned during that period, they would basically get about 32.7% of that. And so that's the other portion of it. And finally, they did a breakdown too of how the settlement is being is spent. Basically, there was a $375 million settlement. There's interest that's been earned as it's been sitting there waiting to be dispersed. And then they listed the attorney's fees, the service awards for Fitch, Corey, Vera, Javier Vasquez, Brandon Vera, and Kyle Kingsbury, taxes and all these other expenses as well, leaving $251,102,249. And $249. Oh, not forget 54 cents to be distributed to the fighters.
Who was that highest paid fighter?
Well, the highest paid fighter we know it's not listed. They don't list any of the names, but we know that the highest paid fighter is Anderson Silva.
And how do we know that he was the highest paid?
The reason we know is there was in the Blair expert report, he was a expert for the defendants. He has an attachment in his report, Appendix F, I think it's called, that has a list of all the purses that were paid out to fighters between 2011 to 2016 in the UFC. And so we can look at each of those payments and we can determine through the process of elimination, because it lists the year a fighter got a purse and the number of UFC fights, or Zuffa fights, I should say, they had at that point in their career. And so we can determine a lot of the highest paid fighters, and we can also do some deduction, because we know for a fact that Ronda Rousey made $18 million during the class period because it's in one of the written reports. We know that Brock Lesnar got $8 million for a fight, $11 million total, because again, it's in the expert reports. We know that Conor McGregor got $27 million. So you figure that out, process elimination, and we basically with Anton Tabueno and some of the other people at Bloody Elbow, we went through that report and we filled out a large number of fighters what they had payment. And so when you look at what Anderson Silva made, you total it up, and he made over $30 million. He's the only fighter that made that much based on the information we had. And then you look at this, it lines up almost exactly, I think within just like $1,000, the number we came up with what this top fighter got paid. So that's what we figured that out. What's more interesting is who is the lowest paid fighter?
Who was
I haven't figured that out yet. We do know that guy may had a $6,000 purse, only one fight in the class period. And because that was a $6,000 purse and he got $14,180 in addition to that, that's why he ended up with $16,138.45.
Wow. So I have a question.
Go ahead.
You had said that the method of delivery would affect when the checks would go out. Were the fighters allowed to choose their method of delivery, whether they got a paper check mailed or whether they got an electronic transfer?
Yeah, they get to choose that. They get to pick how they want it delivered. They have to, I think I can't remember exactly because some must have been the earlier documents. But if you have an electronic, you got to verify your bank information. Where if it's a check, it's already going to the address that you've detailed that you confirmed in your claim form. So I'm not sure which one will actually come first. Tell you the truth.
Okay.
Will you get a written paper check or a wire transfer? Which one goes faster? But you have that option. Whatever you want. If you want to send it to us as a donation, we will take that as well.
That's right. Now, is there anything else to be done with this Lee v. Zuffa case now that the payouts are about to start trickling out?
This is kind of the end. They have to present this to the judge. I cannot remember the exact date, but they have to present this to the judge. He has to give this final approval. And then it will get sent out. There was some fighters contested it, as I did not mention, but I put it in a tweet. I forgot to mention. I think one of the holdups has been of that 1,088 fighters that submitted their claim, 37 of them contested the amount that they were paid. claiming, in other words, that the numbers that were on that form had the wrong number of fights or the wrong compensation. And so they had to look into it. 9 fighters, I believe it was, that they came back and said, you know what, you are correct. This was the wrong information for whatever reasons, and they adjusted it. The other ones did not have, I guess, proof or evidence or, some way to confirm it. And so they could not change it. But that is probably one of the reasons this is taking a little longer. So the judge will approve it no later than September 30th, I believe. If the judge approves it, the checks go out. And then when the fighters finally get their money, this will be the end of Lee v. Zuffa. And we can finally, rub our hands clean, wipe them clean, the slate, and move on to Johnson v. Zuffa, Davis v. Zuffa, Misha Cirkunov v. Zuffa, and all the other cases.
Luke Rockhold, he was on Ariel Helwani's show, and he was talking about how not only is he waiting for his claim to come in, his claim check in Lee v. Zuffa, but that he has several more coming his way. Is he jumping the gun here?
I think he is a little bit, because that it is true that this case, he has this check for definitely coming. And my estimate for him, this is not, I cannot at the top of my head remember exactly, but I believe it's in the $800,000 to $1 million. He has a check coming for his period in the Lee. I could be wrong, but that's a guess. So he has a sizable check, let's just put it that way, coming for Lee. And he has several fights in the UFC afterwards. So I'm sure he's thinking, I'll have another check. But that's dependent on a victory in Johnson v. Zuffa. The settlement is not guaranteed. There's no guarantee that there's more money coming. And people might forget that there was no guarantee there was going to be victory in Lee. One is we had a group of fighters that actually signed up for the lawsuit. That's a big, always been a big problem with these lawsuits, is very few fighters willing to take the risk. And in that case, we should probably compliment, at least all the fighters should thank, John Fitch, Nate Quarry, Brendan Vera, Kyle Kingsbury, Javier Vasquez, and of course, Kong Lee, whose name's the first name on it. Without them, they wouldn't have got this settlement.
What about Carlos Newton?
And Carlos Newton, too, who actually was the first person that was working with Rob Macy with it. So that group of fighters all deserve some credit for getting this and getting fighters a pay, which, it's not as much as people, I think, hoped for originally. They were hoping for mass amounts. But when you look at the amount, and it does look like a sizable amount for a lot of fighters, especially, for many fighters who are on the prelims, the amount they're going to get from this settlement is more than what they earned in the UFC. We know that, Anderson Silva is going to get 10 million on over 30 million of income he made during his run in the UFC. But several fighters that fought 3, 4, 5 times at their beginning contracts, they're going to make more in this settlement than they did in the UFC. So this is kind of like in a weird way, this is the perfectly designed pension fund that everybody's always dreamed about for boxing and MMA. It's a pension fund. Fighters are going to give this large sum. But future fighters, they have to be aware it's not a guarantee they're going to get a similar payment. They cannot count on that. One is, right now we have several fighters that are participating in the class action. We have, again, Cajun Johnson, Tristan Connolly, CB Dalloway with the Johnson v. Zuffa case. We have 3 fighters there. Misha Cirkunov as his name, Cirkunov v. Zuffa, and then Phil Davis. Those 6 fighters have are trying to have class actions, or trying to get class actions going against the UFC and their own antitrust cases. But there is some hurdles, namely that a large number of fighters signed an arbitration agreement and class action waiver. And if they can't defeat those somehow, those suits, might be stopped. Those fighters that are expecting additional check in the future might not get it. And some of them might depend on, can they get future plaintiffs, because these UFC is contesting the current plaintiffs. They're claiming that Johnson, that CB Dalloway and Connolly cannot represent the fighters because none of them signed arbitration agreements and class action waivers. At the same time, they're arguing that Cirkunov cannot represent the fighters that signed those agreements because he signed an arbitration agreement and class action waiver, so he cannot sue him. He has to go to an arbitration. And they're claiming that Phil Davis, because he was part of the Lee v. Zuffa case, cannot file this lawsuit. So all those are being contested, so they might need future plaintiffs, and if they can't get it, they might run into trouble. And they also need success in this case, defeating those arbitration agreements and class action waivers. And I really wish, when I was speaking to James Quinn a couple weeks ago, that we were able to preserve the second half of his lawsuit, because one thing he argued for is that even though fighters that are not named plaintiffs in these antitrust cases, one of the important things they can do is make it publicly known that you support what they're doing, because that can influence the courts. That can influence the public, which can put pressure on the courts that this is the direction that the public wants to see the case to go. And so we have not seen much public support by other fighters outside the select few fighters that are the same ones every time.
And what John meant by, I wish we were able to preserve the second half of the lawsuit, he meant the second half of the interview.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry. I am sorry.
He is lawsuit minded today. Yeah. Now, John, I'm going to go out of order here a little bit because I want to stay on the UFC TKO track a little bit. So I'm going to save the PFL stuff for a little bit later. And I want to get into Dana White, because a story came out that he has some pretty hefty gambling debts. Now, this is alleged because the gambling debts are to Red Rock Casino, and no one from Red Rock Casino would go on record publicly, but a quote source told casino.org, which is a media outlet that, talks about gambling and stuff in Las Vegas. Anyway, they said that Dana owes anywhere from 25 to possibly all the way up to $50 million to Red Rock Casino. So I want to get your thoughts on that.
Well, first, we don't know if it's true at all.
That's right.
But I hope it is.
Me too.
It's just funny to think that he owes that much. Second, I know some people saying, "Oh, it's a nothing burger. He's worth $100 million. This is a drop in the bucket." I'm sorry, but 25 to 50 million worth $100 million, a quarter or half your net worth, would be a tremendous amount of money. Now, I think Dana White's actually worth much more than $100 million.
Yeah. But
even that would be this is a sizable amount of money. But it's probably not a concern for him because his buddies, the Fertittas, own Red Rock Casino. And I'm hoping now, part of me says, well, they're just going to let it go because they're so close with Dana White. Maybe they have other business deals in the future with slap fighting, and maybe, the Fertittas are going to get involved in the boxing venture or something else. Let's not forget that the company that the boxing venture is named after is the street that was their high school.
Yeah.
Where their high school is located, where Bishop Gorman High or Gorman Bishop High, I can't remember which way it goes. That's where the Fertittas and Dana White went to school. That's Holpea. I can't remember how to pronounce that name of that street, named after a native tribe in Arizona. But that's the name of the company that's been signing boxers.
Hulapai?
Hulapai or something. I'm sure Fred Garvin will correct us out there.
Yes.
He looked it up at some point. So, but that is the name of the company that is signing boxers for Zuffa Boxing. And so it makes me suggest maybe the Fertittas are involved. Who knows? But I wouldn't be shocked. So one of it is like, they're going to let it go because they don't need the money. They're just in good relations with Dana White. They're going to let it pass because there's more money to make with them. But I kind of hope that part of it is they know Dana's a bad gambler and they are just taking advantage of their friend by milking him for everything he's worth. I kind of hope that. I don't think that's the case, but I kind of hope. But overall, it's just not that big a story, except for the fact that Dana White, if this is true, just owes a tremendous amount of money and is not the ace blackjack player he claims to be, I guess.
Or baccarat, because he also likes baccarat. They say supposedly the debts are between blackjack and baccarat. But what's more important here, I think, is that we're probably never going to get any clarification if this is a rumor or fact because of who owns the Red Rock. Am I correct?
I would guess, yeah, that's probably true. I don't think they're going to confirm it. They don't want to do anything to embarrass Dana.
Exactly. So for all of you out there that are posting this as definitive fact, you should probably put the word alleged out there before you get in trouble, because Dana White, I imagine that he's quite petty, especially the way that he likes to target smaller people. So just, be careful slinging around the accusation that he absolutely has massive gambling debts. They're alleged, even if we hope that they're not. Now, TKO, let's talk about them since we're on the topic of UFC and properties along the lines of UFC, properties owned by TKO. They made an announcement last Friday that they'll be doubling the dividend for TKO. For listeners out there that do not follow finance closely, what does that mean?
Well, a dividend, if you're not aware out there, is a distribution of a portion of the company's earnings to its shareholders. In other words, if the company has an amount of profit left over that they want to distribute to shareholders, that's the process they use it. Then they distribute it, and based on the number of shares you own, they divide up the amount that's going to be distributed, and it gets paid out that way. So it's basically the way that the business shares its profits with its owners being the shareholders of the stocks. And in this case, for this quarter, they're going to distribute $150 million, which doesn't sound, but times 4, that's $600 million for the year. But the direction they're going with, especially when you consider that this was the year that they noted in their earlier SEC filings that they did not make much profit at the end of last year because they spent it all on paying out the settlements for the antitrust case and some of the Vince McMahon stuff and some merger costs. Well, they're already churning a profit, and it looks like going into next year. Well, I should say they were paying distributions before, but they're going to double it. And it looks like going into next year, this is going to further increase. So they are going to have a large number of money that they're going to be paying out. So this is good for shareholders. If you own stock in it, you are going to get a large number of dividend payments. If you are The Rock, who's he got further shares every month, he gets like 8,000 additional shares, and I think his stock price for his 350,000 shares he'll have is now valued at $70 million. So he's really got to be happy.
Wow. What about like average shareholders? Are there average shareholders, or are they all sitting super wealthy like The Rock?
Well, I mean, it's anybody can buy a share if you have right now $190 for TKO. So there are probably a lot of normal people that have shares in TKO. And for them, they're going to get a small percentage back every quarter. Now in dividend distributions, it's not going to be as much. I can remember for the first distribution, I believe it's 1.6% of the share price. So for a shareholder right now, I think it's going to be doubling. So it's going to go from 38 cents a share to 76 cents a share. Not much when you have, each share is $190. But that means per year, if it continues that way, you're going to get $3.24 per year, which is 1.6% the value of your current share price. And as the profits increase for the company, as we think it's likely going to happen next year, your distributions will probably go up. So, again, it's a little something bonus if you have a share, but if you own a lot of stocks, again, I'll use The Rock as an example, you are going to be sitting looking at a lot of money in the future.
John, would you ever buy TKO stock?
No, I would not.
Okay. All right.
I think, partly because I cover it. So there's a degree of separation.
Let's say you didn't cover it. I'm asking as a person who is pretty well versed in finance, if you were not covering what we cover, if you were just on the outside and you looked at TKO stock, would you ever invest in it?
Well, I mean, I probably would have invested a while ago when I think it was was a much better investment because it's an upside. Now that we've seen baked into it the new TV deal, the WWE deal, all these things happening, it's hard to imagine it's going to get the juice that it had before. So I probably wouldn't suggest now I think the price will probably go up because they are going to see some more deals assigned. But I also think there is risk with TKO. Maybe not as much risk now with Donald Trump, but I think going in the future there are risks in that stock. So I would not personally suggest it. But who am I? Who am I to tell people what to do with their money?
All right. Onward with some TKO stuff. They have a new exclusive partnership. They've inked another deal with T-Mobile Arena. So my question is what exactly does that exclusive partnership mean? Does that mean they can't host anything else at T-Mobile Arena, concerts, what have you? How does that work?
Well, it should exclude, and the UFC often does this, when they go into an arena, they'll make an agreement that you cannot have another MMA promotion in that arena within like 2 months before and 2 months after. Basically, that's their exclusive window. Now, with T-Mobile, I believe, my understanding is they are the only MMA promoter that can hold events there, as well as for pro wrestling. So AEW cannot hold events there. Now, the original deal they signed with them was through UFC signed a deal with the T-Mobile starting in 2017. And now they've expanded it to include the WWE as part of the deal. So they're going to have 4 UFC events are guaranteed to happen at T-Mobile and 2 WWE events per year at the arena. And it makes me question remember Dana White was having a feud with him a little while ago?
Yes. And Mike, I had another question about this. What about boxing events? Because
that I'm not sure.
One of the things that Dana White, didn't he have some beef about them holding a boxing event really close to a UFC pay-per-view?
Well, yes, that's the reason. Remember the reason the first Sphere show was at the Sphere.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Okay, the face!